The Silence Protocol. The Starship Horizon's dawn emerged from its final jump, and Commander Elena Reyes felt her stomach settle as normal space reasserted itself around them. Through the viewports, the massive structure of Harmony Station gleamed like a jewel against the darkness. It was humanity's first official visit to the stellar Concordate's central hub, a moment 300 years in the making. Elena straightened her diplomatic uniform and checked her reflection one last time. Dark hair pulled back, sharp brown eyes that missed nothing, and the calm expression she had practiced for months. Behind her, Lieutenant Torres cleared his throat nervously. This was bigger than first contact. This was humanity's formal introduction to the galaxy's governing body. The docking was smooth, handled by alien technology that made their own systems look primitive. As the airlock hissed open, Elena stepped forward into a corridor that seemed to breathe with its own light. The walls pulsed gently, alive with some technology she didn't understand. Waiting for them was a delegation of beings that defied easy description. The lead figure floated rather than walked, its crystalline body refracting light into rainbow patterns. This was Harmonizer Krell, the current speaker for the Stellar Concordate. When it spoke, the words formed directly in Elena's mind, bypassing her ears entirely. The sensation was unsettling but not unpleasant. "Welcome, humans of Earth." Krell's mental voice resonated with what felt like genuine warmth. "Your journey to the stars has been watched with great interest. We have waited long for this day." Elena bowed slightly, a gesture they had determined was respectful to most species. "On behalf of humanity, I thank you for this invitation. We come in peace, seeking friendship and mutual understanding." The next hours passed in a blur of introductions. Elena met representatives from 40 different species, each more fascinating than the last. The void dancers who existed partially in another dimension, the collective minds who shared thoughts across entire planets, the ancient builders whose civilization predated Earth's formation. Everything seemed perfect. Too perfect. It was during the formal dinner, if it could be called that, when beings consumed everything from pure energy to crystallized time, that Elena noticed the first warning sign. The conversations around her kept circling back to Earth's history, specifically humanity's wars. "Your species has quite a violent past," observed Chancellor Thrix, a serpentine being whose scales shifted through metallic hues. "We have studied your records. World wars, nuclear weapons, countless conflicts. How do you explain such aggression?" Elena had prepared for this question. "Humanity's past is complex," she admitted. "We've made mistakes, terrible ones, but we've learned from them. Our wars taught us the value of peace. Our conflicts showed us the importance of unity. We wouldn't be here today if we hadn't grown beyond our primitive nature." The Chancellor's scales rippled in what might have been skepticism. "Growth, yes. But can violence truly be unlearned? Or does it merely hide, waiting for opportunity?" More questions followed, each more pointed than the last. How many weapons did Earth still maintain? Why did human colonies have defensive installations? What was the purpose of humanity's rapid expansion into multiple star systems? Elena answered honestly but carefully. Yes, humanity maintained defenses, but only for protection against unknown threats. Yes, they were expanding, but only to uninhabited systems. Every answer she gave seemed to deepen the suspicion in alien eyes. The formal assembly was scheduled for the next day. Elena spent the night in quarters that adjusted themselves to human comfort, but sleep wouldn't come. Something was wrong. The questions hadn't been curious, they had been interrogation. She activated her personal communicator and sent an encrypted message to Earth. Just a status update, nothing alarming, but she included a coded phrase that meant she was concerned. The assembly hall was a sphere that defied physics, with every delegate floating at what appeared to be the center, from their own perspective. Elena took her position at the human podium, a small platform that hummed with energy fields. Around her, hundreds of species gathered in absolute silence. Harmonizer Krell materialized at what everyone perceived as the focal point. "The Stellar Concordate is now in emergency session," it announced, and Elena's blood turned cold. Emergency session? This was supposed to be a welcome ceremony. "For 1,000 cycles, the Concordate has maintained peace across known space," Krell continued. "We have prevented conflicts, managed resources, and ensured that no single species could threaten the stability of our community. Today we address a new concern." Images appeared in the air, visible to all. Elena gasped as she recognized Earth, human colonies, and military installations. But the images were wrong, distorted. Ships that looked like cargo vessels were labeled as hidden warships. Research stations were marked as weapon facilities. Mining operations were designated as military expansions. Evidence has been presented that humanity poses a significant threat to galactic peace, Krell stated. Your species has concealed military buildups, developed prohibited technologies, and prepared for aggressive expansion. The concern is not what you have done, but what you are capable of doing. Elena's hands gripped the podium. These images are fabricated. Our military is purely defensive. We have hidden nothing. Every inspection team has had full access to our facilities. The Zarathi Empire thought the same of the extinction fleet 900 cycles ago, said Admiral Vox of the Hegemony Guard. By the time they revealed their true nature, 3 species were already extinct. We cannot take such risks again. Elena realized with horror what was happening. This wasn't a trial or even a real investigation. This was a preemptive strike justified by fear and paranoia. Someone had convinced the Concordat that humanity was dangerous, and they had already decided what to do about it. The vote will now commence, Krell announced. All in favor of immediate containment protocols for the human species? Around the sphere, lights began to flicker. Green for yes, red for no. Elena watched in disbelief as the chamber filled with green light. Only a handful of red lights appeared, quickly overwhelmed by the tide of agreement. The species she had met yesterday, who had seemed so welcoming, were voting to condemn humanity without real evidence or proper defense. The vote is concluded, Krell stated with finality. By a margin of 347 to 23, the Concordat approves immediate implementation of Protocol 7. All human military assets will be surrendered within 1 solar rotation. All human colonies will accept Concordat oversight. Human expansion is permanently suspended. Any resistance will be met with overwhelming force. Elena's mind raced. Protocol 7 was essentially conquest disguised as protection. Humanity would become a puppet state, forever under alien control. But more than that, she recognized the setup. Someone had orchestrated this, manipulated fears and prejudices to turn the galaxy against humanity before they could properly defend themselves. This is illegal, Elena said, her voice cutting through the chamber. You're violating your own charter. Every species has the right to self-governance. You're acting on manipulated evidence and fear, not facts. Fear, repeated Grand Matriarch Selene of the Eternal Garden, is sometimes wisdom. Your species evolved as predators on a death world. You survived through violence and conquered through war. Even now, your entertainment celebrates conflict. Your literature glorifies battle. You are what you are, and we must protect ourselves. Elena felt the walls closing in. Security drones were moving to surround the human delegation. Her staff looked to her for guidance, fear evident in their eyes. She had one chance, one moment to act. Her neural implant, a standard diplomatic tool, was still connected to the quantum communicator on their ship. With a thought, she activated an emergency protocol that had been installed by paranoid military advisors. She had once thought were overreacting. The implant would burn out after one use at maximum power, but it would punch through any interference. She composed a message in her mind, compressed it to its absolute minimum, and added a single word that would tell Earth everything they needed to know. The word was Phoenix. As the transmission burst from her implant, Elena felt the device burn out, sending spikes of pain through her skull. But it was done. Earth would know that humanity had been betrayed, that the galaxy had turned against them without cause, and that they needed to activate their most desperate contingency plans. Krell detected the transmission immediately. Its crystalline form flared with angry light. What have you done? Elena smiled despite the pain and the hopeless situation. I've given humanity the truth. You've made a terrible mistake today. You think you're preventing a war, but you've just started one. Seize them, Krell commanded, and security forces closed in. Elena and her delegation were taken without resistance. There was no point fighting here, not yet. But as they were led away to containment, Elena saw something in the eyes of a few alien delegates. Doubt. Perhaps even regret. The Concordat had voted based on fear of what humanity might become. They were about to learn what humanity actually was when pushed into a corner. The Phoenix Protocol wasn't about surrender or even survival. It was about something much more human. It was about proving that sometimes the hunted become the hunters, and that those who betray trust should be very careful about awakening sleeping giants. The Phoenix Directive Admiral Sarah Chen stood in the war room of Luna Command when the Phoenix signal burned across every screen. The single word carried more weight than any detailed message could have. Phoenix meant total betrayal. Phoenix meant the galaxy had turned against humanity. Phoenix meant that 300 years of peaceful coexistence had been a lie. Around her, officers frozen in shock began to move with practiced efficiency. This was a scenario they had drilled but never believed would happen. Chen's executive officer, Commander Liu, was already pulling up deployment schedules for assets that officially didn't exist. Confirm authenticity, Chen ordered, though she knew the answer. The quantum signature was unmistakable. Ambassador Reyes had sent this, burning out her neural implant to ensure it got through. Confirmed, Admiral. The signal is genuine. We're also detecting massive energy signatures around all human colonies. The Concordate fleet is already in position. Chen felt a cold fury settle into her bones. They had pre-positioned their forces. This wasn't a spontaneous decision. It was a carefully planned betrayal. Someone had orchestrated humanity's downfall and the Concordate had played along perfectly. All right, she said quietly. They want to see what humanity is capable of. Let's show them. Activate Stage 1 of Phoenix Directive. All hidden assets are to begin powered startup. And someone get President Morrison on the line. What the Concordate didn't know, what they had never bothered to truly investigate, was that humanity had learned from its history in ways they couldn't imagine. Yes, humans had fought terrible wars. Yes, they had nearly destroyed themselves multiple times. But each time they had learned, adapted, and prepared for the next threat. The Phoenix Directive was that preparation made manifest. Across the solar system, installations that had been carefully hidden began to reveal themselves. Beneath Mars's northern pole, massive hangar doors opened for the first time. Ships that had been built in absolute secrecy over decades began their launch sequences. The Concordate thought they knew humanity's military strength. They had seen perhaps 10% of it. On Earth, President Morrison addressed the planet's population. The speech was short and direct. Humanity had been betrayed by those who claimed to be friends. The galaxy had decided humans were too dangerous to be free. The choice was simple: surrender and accept eternal servitude or fight for the right to exist as a free species. The response was unanimous. Humanity would fight, but this wouldn't be a conventional war. Admiral Chen understood that humanity couldn't match the Concordate's combined fleet in a straight battle. They had technology advantages and overwhelming numbers, so humanity would fight the way they always had when outmatched. They would be clever, unpredictable, and absolutely ruthless when necessary. The first surprise came at Neptune Station. The Concordate fleet, commanded by Hierarchs Zeltor, had positioned itself to blockade the outer system, preventing any human ships from escaping to deep space. They expected humanity to try to run or negotiate. Instead, they got Captain Maria Volkov and the ghost ship Revenant. The Revenant had been built using technology reverse-engineered from crashed alien vessels and improved with human innovation. It could phase partially out of normal space, making it nearly impossible to target. Volkov used this advantage to appear inside the Concordate formation, deliver devastating strikes, and vanish before they could respond. Zeltor's fleet lost 6 ships in the first hour. They hadn't lost a vessel in combat in over 3 centuries. The psychological impact was as devastating as the physical damage. These humans weren't fighting like any species they had encountered. They weren't trying to minimize casualties or follow established rules of engagement. They were fighting to win. Back on Luna, Chen coordinated the global response. Every human colony received the same orders. Resist by any means necessary. Make occupation impossible. Turn every settlement into a fortress and every citizen into a potential fighter. The results were immediate and shocking to the Concordate. On Colony New Sahara, civilians rigged mining charges throughout their cities. The message to the approaching occupation force was simple: try to land and we'll destroy everything rather than let you have it. The Concordate, who valued resources above all else, couldn't comprehend such determination. On the agricultural world of Haven, colonists poisoned their own crops and contaminated water supplies. They would rather starve than feed their occupiers. Children were taught songs about resistance. Artists painted murals of defiance. Scientists began working on weapons that violated every treaty humanity had ever signed, because those treaties no longer mattered. But the real shock came from Earth itself. When the main Concordat fleet arrived, expecting to intimidate humanity's homeworld into submission, they found something unprecedented. Every human on the planet, all 12 billion, had been given a choice. They could surrender or they could fight. Not a single person chose surrender. Admiral Chen activated Stage 2 of the Phoenix Directive. Hidden satellites throughout the solar system revealed themselves, each one carrying weapons that humanity had developed in secret. Antimatter missiles, singularity bombs, and devices that could destabilize stars. The message to the Concordat was clear. If humanity was going down, they would take everyone with them. Harmonizer Krell, observing from the Concordat's command ship, felt something it had never experienced before: genuine fear. These humans weren't just willing to die for their freedom. They were willing to destroy everything if they couldn't have it. This was beyond anything in the Concordat's experience. "They're insane," Krell's advisor whispered. "No rational species would threaten mutual annihilation." "No," Chen's voice came through on an open channel, having hacked their communications. "We're human. We're the species that split the atom while at war with ourselves. We're the ones who looked at the void and decided to conquer it. We're the people who turned a death world into a garden. And you made the mistake of backing us into a corner." The battle that followed would be remembered as the longest day. Concordat forces, superior in technology and numbers, faced humans who fought like nothing they had ever encountered. Human pilots flew suicide runs, ramming their ships into enemy vessels. Marine units boarded Concordat ships and fought with a savagery that horrified species who had forgotten what true warfare looked like. But humanity's greatest weapon wasn't their hidden fleets or secret technologies. It was their unity. When the Concordat threatened Earth, every human colony responded. When they attacked one settlement, others sent aid. The Concordat had expected humans to fracture under pressure. Instead, they became diamond hard, unified by shared danger. The turning point came when humanity revealed Stage 3 of the Phoenix Directive. They had been studying Concordat technology for years, finding weaknesses and developing counters. The quantum communication network the Concordat relied on, humanity had learned to jam it. The energy shields that made their ships invulnerable, human scientists had developed frequencies that could disrupt them. One by one, advantages the Concordat had taken for granted disappeared. Their coordinated fleet movements became chaotic without instant communication. Their impregnable defenses suddenly showed vulnerabilities. And all the while, human forces grew stronger, learning from each engagement, adapting with a speed that stunned their opponents. Grand Admiral Vox, the same who had voted for humanity's containment, found his mighty dreadnought under assault by ships that shouldn't exist. As his shields failed and human boarding parties breached his hull, he sent a desperate message to the Galactic Council. "We were wrong. They're not planning to conquer the galaxy. They just want to be left alone. But if we continue this war, they'll destroy us all. These humans don't fight for glory or resources. They fight for survival. And that makes them more dangerous than anything we've faced." The war lasted 90 days. In that time, humanity went from a contained species to the most feared force in the galaxy, not because they conquered worlds or enslaved species, but because they showed what happened when someone tried to take their freedom. The Phoenix Directive had worked exactly as intended. Finally, Harmonizer Krell requested a ceasefire. The being that had so confidently voted to contain humanity now faced Elena Reyes, who had been released from custody when human forces liberated Harmony Station. The crystalline entity's light was dim, uncertain. "We underestimated you," Krell admitted. "We saw your past violence and feared your future. We didn't understand that your wars had taught you the value of peace, that your conflicts had shown you when fighting was necessary." Elena stood tall despite her exhaustion. "You betrayed us based on fear and lies. You nearly destroyed a peaceful species because we didn't fit your definition of safe. The question now is whether the galaxy has learned from this mistake." The treaty that followed was unlike anything in Concordat history. Humanity didn't demand reparations or territory. They wanted something far more important: guaranteed autonomy and the right to defend themselves. No species would ever again be subjected to Protocol 7. The Concordat's power to unilaterally decide the fate of entire civilizations was broken. As the human fleet stood down and peace returned to the galaxy, a new understanding emerged. Humanity hadn't won through superior technology or numbers. They had won because when faced with extinction, They had chosen to fight rather than kneel. They had shown the galaxy that some things were worth dying for, and that made them worth living alongside. The Phoenix Directive was officially deactivated, but its message echoed across the stars. Humanity had answered betrayal with a single word, and that word had changed everything. They had risen from the ashes of betrayal stronger than before, and the galaxy would never forget the lesson they had taught. In the end, those who had voted to contain humanity learned the truth about humans. They weren't conquerors or destroyers. They were survivors, and that made them the most dangerous and valuable allies the galaxy could have. The word Phoenix became a symbol not of human aggression, but of human resilience. And across the galaxy, species whispered a new saying: "Never betray humanity, for they will rise from any ashes you create, and they will remember everything."